Hey guys, so I've been meaning to do a video about some book gift ideas for a long time. So I finally gathered all my books that I want to recommend. So Christmas is coming up and you might be looking for the perfect book gift. So I'm hoping that this guide will help you to pick some of the books. First of all, so I will be breaking this video down into sections. And you can see when you scroll on the bottom of the video that there will be different genres. I'm hoping in this way there will be a book recommendation for everyone out there. So first of all, I want to start out with classical literature. I myself am a huge fan of the Chiltern Classics editions, and these are amazing editions. And I have a couple of these. I have, I think, 4. And I've been collecting them and I absolutely love them. And I think these editions make a great gift to someone because everyone is going to love them. They have like these gold sprayed edges and they're hardcover and they're actually not that expensive. I'd say it doesn't really matter which classic you pick because there will be something for everyone. Next up, we have historical fiction. And I have 2 novels that I want to share with you. The first one is Romanov by Nadine Brandes. And it is a retelling of Anastasia. And need I tell more? It is such a good book and I love stories about the Romanovs, and yeah, I highly recommend this one. It is so good. So it's kind of a realistic retelling of the life of Anastasia, but with like a small touch of magic, which is, it's good. The next historical fiction that I'd like to recommend is Pandora. Pandora by Susan Stokes Chapman. And this is, I have this stunning edition that I got gifted this year, and it was one of my favorite reads this year. I enjoyed it so much. So it is about Dora, and she is living with her uncle in an old antique shop. Ah, such a setting. And one day, this very mysterious vase is getting delivered into the shop. And Dora notices that her uncle is acting in very mysterious ways about this vase, and she wants to find out the secret behind the objects. And yeah, I cannot recommend this book enough. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to include a romance book, but standing before my bookshelf, I noticed that suddenly I never read romance books and I cannot really recommend one to you, but the next genre is the horror thriller genre, and I have 2 books, and one of these books can fit into the romance genre. So the first one is Crimson Peak. Crimson Peak is one of my favorite books. I reread it so much. I didn't reread it this year, but chances are very high that I will be rereading it next year. And it's actually a movie, and it got turned into a book. Usually it's the other way around, but this one was first a movie and then turned into a book. But the writing style, it's written by, oh my god, I cannot, Nancy Holder. It's written by her, and the writing style is just so good. It isn't a big book, and I would recommend it to anyone who loves reading romance stories but in a dark, mysterious, horror thriller-like setting, because it's really, I don't want to spoil it, but it's kinda, it has this very gothic vibe, and it isn't just a love story, it's so much more. If you haven't heard about the story, it's about a young woman, and she marries a young man who lives at the top, at a peak, a crimson peak actually, and this young man that she married obviously keeps secrets. She wants to discover what secrets he holds, and she also notices that the mansion that they live in is haunted, so there are ghosts. And she is uncovering all these secrets about her husband and about the house. Very, very highly recommend this one. The next book that kept me to the edge of my seat was The Near Bone. I've also read it this year, I think, and it was actually the cover that made me pick it up in the bookstore. And The Near Bone is actually about a woman who has been married to her husband for many, many years. And they live in a cabin in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by snow and trees. And then one day, so the woman isn't really happy because her husband is very aggressive with her. He beats her. He really abuses her. And then one day she hears this really howling sound, and they discover that a creature is living in the woods near where they live. And then in the following days there is a group of people who comes to hunt the monster, and things evolve from there. I really enjoyed this one, which is why I'm recommending it. So if you know someone who is attracted to this dark atmosphere of snow and living in a cabin in the woods in the middle of nowhere, this one is the right one. Next up we have fantasy, one of my favorite genres, and I always recommend the same book when I recommend fantasy novels. And I always recommend Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. This is my favorite novel by him, and it's actually super weird because Brandon Sanderson is one of my favorite authors in fantasy genre, and my two favorite novels by him are the least favorite novels of the fandom, which is it always blows my mind because I have such an unpopular opinion, but Elantris is amongst the least favorite novels within the fandom, which it blows my mind because it's so good. It is also a standalone, so it kind of makes it easier to recommend it, because if you don't like it, it's just one book. This is a story about Elantris, and Elantris was once a beautiful magical city. People who lived there were able to perform magic, and it fell into decay. People lost their magic abilities, and it became a city, an ugly city in decay and in mud, covered in mud. And the story follows Prince Raoden, who got banished to this city to live there. And it also goes, and it also follows Princess Serena. She's actually sent to the kingdom to marry Raoden, Prince Raoden, but she discovers that he died. Now, Raoden isn't actually dead. He's living inside the walls of Elantris, and while he is trying to discover why Elantris is so dirty and why people cannot perform magic anymore, in the meantime, Princess Serena discovers that Raoden is living in Elantris, and she's also trying to avoid a war, which is started by a priest, and he is trying to start a rebellion, start a war, and she is trying to stop it. This is what Elantris is about. It's a standalone, and I highly recommend it. Next up, we have a gift idea for people who love big books or who are not afraid of big books. And I'm so sorry, have another Brandon Sanderson. This is Warbreaker, and again, this is a standalone, which makes it so easy to recommend it. It is a big book, and I found it such an original story. It is, together with Elantris, it is my favorite Brandon Sanderson novel. I haven't read the Stormlight Archive yet, but one day I will, but up until this day, Elantris and this one are my favorite. This is a story about gods, and magical abilities are based on color. We follow Princess Vivenna, and she is chosen to marry the god king. And so she is sent to the capital to marry the god king, but he is a very feared man. And Vivenna learns about conspiracies, about magic, about the truth about the gods. So yeah, very interesting story here. Next, we have small books. So if you're looking for a small book to give to someone because this person isn't much of a reader, or he or she likes smaller books, then I warmly recommend The Picture of Dorian Gray. It is one of the smallest books that I've read, and I love it. I love this story so much, and it is classic literature, but it is very modern. Like, it's very easy to read and very easy to get through. And again, the Chiltern Classics editions are so beautiful. Like, they make the perfect gift. The Picture of Dorian Gray is about a young man who fears aging. And so he sees someone's portrait being made, and he speaks aloud his concerns about aging and everything, and he decides he wants his own portrait made, his own portrait painted. He discovers that once the portrait is made, the painting becomes uglier and uglier, but Dorian himself, he doesn't age. And it is such an interesting concept, and I loved everything about this book. So I highly recommend. The next book that I would like to recommend is for people who are into philosophy or are willing to self-reflect and work on themselves. And the book that I would like to recommend is Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius was a Roman emperor, and he kept a journal for himself. It wasn't intended to publish. But it got into publishing later because so many people related to his words, and his words still resonate with so many people because they are so true. And I would recommend Meditations to everyone, to literally everyone. It got recommended to me by a good friend, and I loved it. I loved reading it, and it got me into philosophy, and I'm so grateful for it, because I don't think that I would have gotten into philosophy if I hadn't read Meditations. So I highly recommend this book to gift to anyone. The next recommendation is for cat lovers, and it is The Traveling Cat Chronicles. I don't own the book because I got it from the library, same for Meditations, but it was the first book that made me cry. I cried my eyes out. It was so emotional. It was such a roller coaster. Like, this book and we clicked. If it were a person, I'd marry the book, you know? It's just, it was meant to be. The story follows a young man and his cat. And this young man is looking for a new owner for his cat. And so he and his cat are traveling the country looking for the perfect cat owner. Next up, I want to recommend a book for people who like to read darker stories. It's a hard book to describe, but I would like to recommend The Warlow Experiment. First of all, can we speak about this cover? Because, oh my god, I saw this one in the bookstore and I thought, oh my god, this cover is gorgeous. But then I read the back of the book and I was so intrigued. So The Warlow Experiment is about a scientist who is intrigued by a project about isolation. So the scientist is looking for a subject who is willing to spend 7 years underground in a room without any social contact. And the subject is supposed to keep a journal, and he cannot speak to anyone for 7 years, and he gets paid for the job. One man is desperate enough to apply, and his name is John Warlow, hence The Warlow Experiment. And it is such a dark book. It is I cannot really say which genre this is. It's just dark and interesting, and I have never read anything like this. Highly recommend. Next up, one of my favorite genres, dystopian books. The book that I would like to recommend is The Fifth Wave. This is a Dutch edition, and The Fifth Wave is actually a trilogy. I know they made movies out of the books. I have never seen them, but I've seen the trailer and it looked absolutely horrible. So I'm not gonna watch the movies. But the books, oh my god, I love the books so much. These are very, very good. I don't want to say much about the book because no spoilers, but it is about a young woman, a girl, actually I think she's around 17, and she and her brother have to survive in a world that is crumbling down because creatures are taking over their world. It kept me to the edge of my seat the whole time. I loved all three of the books. There wasn't a book in the trilogy that I liked less. And the writing style, it's just so raw and real, and I loved everything about the series. So, Dystopian. Next up, children's books. I haven't read a lot of children's literature, but the book that is my favorite, my current favorite, is The Secret Garden, and it is also a children classics edition. So this is perfect for people who like reading, for example, short stories or like reading children's stories. And what I liked about this book is it didn't really read like a children's story. There is so much love for nature in here. It is about an orphan named Mary Lennox, and she is going to live with her uncle in a big mansion. And she discovers that there is a secret garden, and there is also hiding someone inside the mansion. I'm not gonna tell because of spoilers, and I want you to discover it yourself, or person that you're gifting the book to. I found it just such a beautifully written book, and I highly recommend. I really love this. The next book that I want to recommend is for people who love medieval stories and medieval themes, and that is The Sin Eater by Megan Campisi. The Sin Eater. First of all, again, this cover, I fell in love with it, and it's so stunning. This is about a young woman, May, and she is condemned to a life of a sin eater. And a sin eater is actually something that really existed. So these were people who were, they went to funerals of people who died, and they had to eat certain foods to take the sins of the deceased person to them. And so May has to do this. So she goes to funerals and she eats the foods and takes the sins to her. May has a friend, Sin Eater, and one day she gets, she has to eat a deer heart. And this means that the person who died has murdered someone. And this woman refuses to eat the deer heart. But May was friends with this woman, and when she gets killed over this, she decides she wants to find out why the deer heart was put there and by who. This one is also a very dark story set in a medieval setting, and I love the fact that this is based on a true medieval occupation. So yeah, I wanted to put this one into the recommendations too. If you know someone who likes to read war-themed novels, then I would like to recommend 1,000 Splendid Suns. This is a Dutch edition, and I've read this book multiple times. I love it so much. It basically is about two women who are married to one man, and he treats them very poorly, and these two women unexpectedly become friends. And this is taking place during the war in Afghanistan. Highly recommend. Then there is one final book that I would like to recommend if this person that you're gifting the book to is into male romance, so very queer, and they also have to love kind of a fantasy setting, a very royal setting, and that is A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland. This book surprised me so hard. I absolutely loved it. I loved every page, and it's kind of a big book, but I went through it in no time. I actually got this edition gifted from a friend of mine. It is so stunning. There's a bookmark too, which I really love. And the inside, oh my goodness, look at this book. I am in love, but the inside is even better. I loved it so much. To keep it short, it is about a prince who gets appointed a bodyguard, and these two men fall in love. It also falls into the haters to lovers trope. So if you or the person that you're gifting this book to is into this, they absolutely need to read this one. These are all my recommendations. I hope it was useful. I wish you the best of luck picking some gifts for your loved ones, and books are always the best gifts.